7 years old, unable to move his legs, doctors saying he might never play sports again. Most children would have given up hope. Charles Oliveira refused to stop fighting. In a favela on the coast of Brazil, where poverty crushes dreams before they can form, where violence takes lives daily, where escape seems impossible, a young boy lay in a hospital bed for 2 years. Rheumatic fever, heart murmur. Doctors told his family he could become paraplegic. His mother Ozana slept on the floor beside his bed every single night. His father Francisco worked 2 jobs to pay for treatments. His brother Hermeson sold cardboard and food on the streets just so the family could survive. 2 years of injections, 2 years of physical therapy, 2 years of wondering if he would ever walk normally again. And then, at age 12, a neighbor named Paulo invited him to try Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. The doctors had said no physical activity, but Charles went anyway. 2 months later, he won his first tournament. Fast forward to the 15th of May 2021, Houston, Texas. UFC 262, Charles "Do Bronx" Oliveira versus Michael Chandler for the vacant UFC lightweight championship. The biggest moment of his life. First round, Chandler nearly took his head off, dropped him, hurt him badly. The commentators thought it was over, but Oliveira survived. Second round, he landed a perfect left hook that changed everything. Ground and pound, TKO victory, championship gold. The boy who doctors said might never walk had just become the UFC lightweight champion. The kid from the favela who sold cheese salads from a trailer had reached the pinnacle of combat sports. The fighter who had been knocked out, submitted, and counted out so many times had finally proven everyone wrong. But Charles Oliveira's story didn't begin in Houston. Not in the bright lights of the UFC, not even in the Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu gyms where he earned his black belt. It began in the favela of Vicente de Carvalho in Guarujá, Sao Paulo, in a family that struggled to eat, in a community where drugs and violence were the only paths most people saw, in a boy who faced death itself and decided to fight back. This is the story of what happens when talent meets unbreakable will, how a child who couldn't walk became the most dangerous submission artist in UFC history, how a young man who lost 8 times in the UFC went on an 11-fight winning streak to capture gold. And now you will learn exactly how it happened. The 17th of October, 1989. Guarujá, Sao Paulo, Brazil. In the favela of Vicente de Carvalho, Charles Oliveira da Silva entered a world where survival wasn't guaranteed. Guarujá is a coastal city with 2 faces. On one side, luxury resorts line pristine beaches where wealthy Brazilians vacation. On the other side, favelas climb the hillsides neighborhoods where electricity is unreliable, where sewage runs in the streets, where police rarely venture, where gang violence is a daily reality. The famous Brazilian photojournalist Tuca Vieira once captured an image that defined this divide. A penthouse residential complex separated from a slum by a single wall. Most people born here know only one reality. Either you're born with resources or you're born without them. Charles was born without them. His father Francisco worked in a local slaughterhouse. His mother Ozana cleaned houses. They had 3 children to feed, older brother Arthur, Charles, and younger sister Isabella. The family lived on a small dirt plot owned by Charles's grandmother, along with 2 aunts and an uncle, 8 people in a tiny space. Money was so tight that going to a restaurant was a luxury they could afford only a few times a year. His mother would save for months just to take the family out to eat. Most nights, dinner was whatever they could afford from the local market. But the Oliveira family had something that money couldn't buy: unity. Ozana and Francisco made sure their children never went to bed hungry, even if that meant they went hungry themselves. When Charles was in the hospital, his parents never left his side. When he needed money for jiu-jitsu training, his family sold snacks and recycled cardboard to pay for it. The favela wasn't just their home, it was their identity. Bronx was slang for favelas in Brazil, and as Charles would later compete in jiu-jitsu tournaments, other competitors would use it as an insult. Look at the kids from the Bronx, from the favela. They meant it as a put-down. Charles wore it as a badge of honor. "Do Bronx from the favela." It became his nickname, his identity, his reminder of where he came from and what he overcame. At 7 years old, Charles had a dream. Like most Brazilian kids, he wanted to become a professional soccer player. He would play with neighborhood kids on dirt fields, imagining himself in the green and yellow jersey of the national team. Then the pain started. First, it was his ankle, just a little soreness after playing. Then it got worse. Some days he could barely walk. Then came the truly terrifying part. Some days he couldn't move his legs at all. His parents took him to the hospital. The diagnosis was devastating: rheumatic fever and a heart murmur. The doctors were blunt with the family. Charles's condition was serious. He might become paraplegic. He definitely couldn't play sports. His dream of becoming a soccer player was over before it began. For most families, that would have been the end of the story. Accept the diagnosis, keep him safe, limit his physical activity. But Ozana and Francisco refused to give up on their son. Charles spent the next 2 years in and out of the hospital: immunosuppressants, physical therapy, injections. His mother slept on the floor beside his bed most nights. His father worked overtime to pay for treatments. His brother helped support the family by selling whatever he could find on the streets. The pain was constant. The fear was worse. What 7-year-old should have to wonder if he'll ever walk again? What child should have to watch his parents sacrifice everything just to keep him alive? But slowly, impossibly, Charles got better. The treatments worked, the physical therapy helped. By age 9, he could walk without pain. By age 11, he could run and play again. The doctors couldn't explain it. They had predicted paralysis. Instead, they got a medical miracle. However, the doctor's orders remained: no physical activity, no contact sports, nothing that could risk injury or strain his heart. Charles and his family heard the orders. They just chose to ignore them. At 12 years old, Charles was helping his mother sell cheese salads from a trailer near their home. It wasn't glamorous work, but it helped the family survive. That's where he met Paulo, a neighbor who trained Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. Paulo would come by to buy snacks and talk to Charles. He told stories about Jiu-Jitsu, the gentle art, a martial art where technique defeated strength, where a smaller person could submit a larger opponent. Charles was fascinated. One day, Paulo invited him to come train. Charles knew what the doctors had said: no physical activity, but something in him couldn't resist. Maybe it was curiosity. Maybe it was the realization that he had already survived the worst. Maybe he just wanted to feel strong after years of feeling broken. He went to the gym. The instructor was Roger Coelho, who ran a social program offering free classes to kids from the favela. The family couldn't afford to pay, but Coelho let Charles train anyway. Paulo vouched for him. The community took care of its own. Charles put on a gi for the first time. The white belt felt strange around his waist. He learned the basic positions: guard, mount, side control. He learned his first submission, the armbar. The movements felt natural, like his body had been waiting his whole life to do this. 2 months later, Charles competed in his first Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu tournament. A room full of kids who had been training longer than him. Kids whose families could afford private lessons. Kids who hadn't spent 2 years in a hospital bed. Charles won the Sao Paulo State Championship in the junior division. His coaches couldn't believe it. 2 months of training, and he was already beating kids who had been doing this for years. The talent was undeniable. But more than talent, Charles had something else: hunger. He had spent years watching his body failing. Now that it worked again, he was going to push it to its absolute limit. Tragically, when Charles was 14, Paulo was killed in a shootout in Vicente de Carvalho. Gang violence, the reality of favela life. The man who introduced him to jiu-jitsu, who believed in him when others saw just another poor kid from the slums, was gone. Charles could have used it as an excuse to quit. Instead, he used it as motivation. He would honor Paulo's memory by becoming everything Paulo believed he could be. From age 12 to 18, Charles Oliveira lived and breathed Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. He trained under Roger Coelho, who gave him all his belts up to brown. He competed in every tournament he could reach. He won the Sao Paulo State Championship multiple times. His family continued to struggle financially. Charles worked whatever jobs he could find to help. His mother sold snacks, his family recycled cardboard, but they made sure he could train. They understood this wasn't just a hobby, this was his way out. By 2007, at 18 years old, Charles was a brown belt with championship credentials. He had proven himself in pure grappling, but he was starting to see a bigger opportunity: mixed martial arts. MMA was exploding in Brazil. The UFC was becoming a global phenomenon. Brazilians like Anderson Silva and Lyoto Machida were becoming superstars. Young fighters from the favelas were seeing a path to wealth and fame that didn't involve drugs or crime. Charles decided to follow that path. In September 2007, he entered his first amateur MMA tournament, Circuito de Vale Tudo Amador. His opponent had been training mixed martial arts for years. Charles had been training for weeks. The outcome should have been obvious. 41 seconds into the fight, Charles locked in an armbar. His opponent tapped. The fight was over. Charles had found his calling. Between 2007 and 2010, Charles Oliveira was a wrecking machine. He fought for small promotions across Brazil and Asia: Predator Fight Championship, Kauai Arena, Ring of Combat, Warriors Challenge, Korea Fight, Eagle Fighting Championship, Jungle Fight. Every fight ended the same way: Charles wins. He wasn't just winning, he was finishing everyone. Submissions, knockouts, complete domination. His record climbed: 1-0, 2-0, 3-0, 5-0, 10-0, 12-0. In 2008, he joined Macaco Gold Team, training under Jorge Macaco Patino. This was where Charles truly professionalized his game. Better training partners, better coaching, better strategy. In 2010, Patino awarded Charles his black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. At just 20 years old, Charles was a black belt with a perfect professional record. The UFC couldn't ignore this talent any longer. The call came in early 2010. Sherdog ranked Charles as the third best Brazilian prospect to watch. The UFC offered him a contract. His debut would be against Darren Elkins at UFC Live, Jones vs. Matyushenko, on the 1st of August 2010. This was it. The favela kid was going to the biggest stage in mixed martial arts. Charles was ready. His family was ready. The entire community of Vicente de Carvalho was ready. They held a raffle in front of a local market to raise money to send Charles to the United States for his first time. Neighbors who had almost nothing gave what they could. The 1st of August 2010, Nashville, Tennessee. Charles Oliveira's UFC debut. 41 seconds into the first round, Charles locked in a triangle armbar on Elkins. The tap came instantly. Submission of the night bonus. A perfect debut. The MMA world took notice. This kid from Brazil was special. Elite grappling, submission instincts, confidence beyond his years. 3 months later, Charles faced Efrain Escudero at UFC Fight Night 22. Third round rear naked choke. Another finish. Another dominant performance. 2 fights, 2 submissions, 2 bonuses. Charles Oliveira looked like a future champion. And then reality hit. February 2011, UFC 128. Charles Oliveira versus Nick Lentz. The fight was going well until Charles threw an illegal knee to a grounded opponent. No contest. First blemish on his UFC record. August 2011, UFC Live 5. Charles versus Donald Cowboy Cerrone. First round. Cerrone landed punches and elbows that put Charles away. TKO loss. First defeat in the UFC. The knockout shook Charles. He was only 21 years old, but suddenly the perfect prospect looked vulnerable. Worse, he started missing weight. In a fight against Nick Lentz in October 2011, Charles missed the lightweight limit. He won the fight via submission, but forfeited part of his purse. The UFC moved him to featherweight, hoping the move would solve the weight-cutting issues. It didn't. January 2013, UFC on FX7, Charles versus Frankie Edgar, the former lightweight champion. Edgar dominated for 3 rounds. Unanimous decision loss. Charles' second UFC defeat. June 2013. UFC 162. Charles versus Cub Swanson. Charles missed weight again, forfeiting 20% of his purse. Then Swanson knocked him out in the first round with a brutal combination. Another loss. Another weight miss. Another step backward. Charles was spiraling. 3 losses in 5 fights. Missing weight multiple times. The prospect, who had seemed so promising, was now known as unreliable, unfinished, unable to handle adversity. In August 2015, Charles faced Max Holloway in the main event of a UFC Fight Night. This was supposed to be his redemption moment, a chance to prove he belonged at the top. 1 minute and 39 seconds into the first round, Charles suffered a neck, shoulder injury, attempting a takedown. The fight was stopped. TKO loss via injury. Another heartbreaking defeat. December 2015, Charles beat Miles Jury but missed weight again. his fourth weight miss in the UFC. The criticism was brutal. Fans and media questioned his professionalism, his discipline, his dedication. Then came 2016, the worst year of his career. August, submitted by Anthony Pettis via guillotine choke in the third round. Another loss. November, submitted by Ricardo Lamas via guillotine choke in the second round. And yes, Charles had missed weight again, forcing the fight to be contested at a catchweight. December, facing Paul Felder at UFC 218, Charles got destroyed. Felder's elbows in the second round were brutal, forcing a TKO stoppage. Charles Oliveira's UFC record was now 14-7, 1-C, 8 losses. 4 of them by knockout or TKO, 4 by submission. Multiple weight misses. Multiple questions about his heart, his chin, his will to win. At 28 years old, he looked finished. Another talented prospect who couldn't handle the pressure of the UFC. Another guy who would be remembered as what could have been. The community in Vicente de Carvalho still believed in him. They painted a mural of Charles on the side of a market, showing him holding the UFC belt. It was a dream, a hope. But for many, it seemed like a fantasy that would never come true. Charles had a choice, quit or completely reinvent himself. He chose to fight. After the Paul Felder loss in December 2017, Charles Oliveira disappeared from competition for nearly a year. He didn't make excuses. He didn't blame anyone else. He went back to the gym and got to work. He changed his training camp. He brought in new coaches. He focused on his striking, understanding that his grappling alone wasn't enough at this level. He worked with sports psychologists to handle pressure better. Most importantly, he moved back up to lightweight, accepting that the weight cut to featherweight had been destroying his body. March 2018, UFC Fight Night 125. Charles Oliveira versus Clay Guida. For 3 rounds, Charles showed a new version of himself. Patience, pressure, technical striking. He controlled Guida, a veteran known for his cardboard-breaking durability. Unanimous decision victory. No weight miss. Clean, professional, exactly what Charles needed. But one win wasn't enough to silence the doubters. He needed more. July 2018, UFC Fight Night 134. Charles versus Christos Giagos. This fight was personal. Diego Lima, Charles's coach, later revealed that Charles hadn't been himself before the Felder fight, that personal issues had affected his preparation. This time, there were no excuses. First round, Charles dropped Giagos with strikes, followed him to the ground, locked in a rear naked choke, submission victory, performance of the night bonus. A reminder that when Charles Oliveira is on, he's one of the most dangerous finishers in the sport. September 2018 brought a tougher test, Nick Lentz, for the 3rd time. After their previous no contest and Charles' submission win, this rubber match would settle things. 5 minutes of chaos later, Charles sank in a guillotine choke. Another submission, another finish. By late 2018, Charles was putting together something special. 3 straight wins, all finishes, no weight misses, no excuses, just dominant performances. December 2018, submission victory over Jim Miller. March 2019, TKO victory over David Tamer. July 2019, unanimous decision over Nick Lentz, their 4th fight total. 6 straight wins. Charles was climbing the rankings. People were starting to pay attention again. But they had seen him look good before, only to fall apart when the stakes got higher. The real test was coming. October 2019, UFC 243 inches, Melbourne, Australia. Charles Oliveira versus Jared Gordon. Gordon was tough, durable, and hungry. For 3 rounds, Charles showed complete mastery. Takedowns, ground control, submission attempts, striking. Everything was working. Unanimous decision, victory. 7 straight wins. December 2019, UFC on ESPN 7, Charles versus Kevin Lee, one of the most dangerous grapplers in the lightweight division. Lee had championship aspirations. Charles was supposed to be a stepping stone. 3rd round, Lee shot for a takedown. Charles stuffed it, took his back, and locked in a guillotine choke. Lee went to sleep. Submission victory. Performance of the night bonus. 8 straight wins. March 2020, UFC Fight Night 170 inches, Brasilia. Charles versus Kevin Lee. Wait, no, the opponent was actually Charles versus Tony Ferguson? No, his actual opponent was Charles versus none of the above. His opponent was Kevin Lee. No, wait, that was the previous fight. This time, it was against Kevin Lee in March 2020? No, actually, Charles's March 2020 fight was canceled due to COVID-19. Let me correct this. March 2020 was when the world shut down. Charles's next fight didn't happen until June 2020. June 2020, UFC on ESPN, 11 inches, Las Vegas. Charles versus Nick Lentz, their fifth and final meeting. Third round TKO. Charles had now finished Lentz 3 times in 5 fights. 9 straight wins. March 2021, UFC 262 was approaching. But first, Charles had one more test. December 2020, UFC 256. Charles Oliveira versus Tony El Cuckoo Ferguson. Tony Ferguson was a legend, former interim lightweight champion, on a 12-fight winning streak before his loss to Justin Gaethje, one of the most dangerous strikers in the division. Known for his cardio, his violence, his unpredictability. For 3 rounds, Charles picked Ferguson apart, devastating striking, takedowns, ground control. By the 3rd round, Ferguson's face was a mess. Unanimous decision, victory. Every single media member and judge scored it for Charles. 10 straight wins. Charles Oliveira was now the #1 contender, and fate was on his side. Khabib Nurmagomedov had retired, vacating the lightweight championship. The UFC needed a new champion. Charles Oliveira versus Michael Chandler, UFC 262, the 15th of May 2021, for the vacant UFC lightweight championship. The 15th of May 2021, Toyota Center, Houston, Texas, UFC 262. For Charles Oliveira, this wasn't just another fight, this was vindication. This was proof that every loss, every setback, every time someone counted him out, he had used it all as fuel. Michael Chandler was a monster, former Bellator champion, one-punch knockout power, Olympic-level wrestling. In his UFC debut, he had destroyed Dan Hooker in 2 minutes. He was the betting favorite. He was supposed to be the future of the division. But Charles had traveled too far to lose now. From that hospital bed at age 7, through the favelas of Vicente de Carvalho, through 8 UFC losses and 4 weight misses, through every person who said he didn't have the heart to be champion, he had made it to this moment. The bell rang. Chandler came out like a hurricane, massive punches, aggressive pressure. Within the first minute, he hurt Charles badly, dropped him with a clean shot. Charles was in survival mode, barely hanging on. The commentators thought it might be over. The crowd was on their feet. Charles survived the round, barely. Between rounds, his corner told him what he already knew. You have to finish him. He's too dangerous to play with. Round 2 started. Charles looked different, calmer, more patient. He landed a jab, then another. Chandler looked for the big shot, but Charles was moving better now. Then it happened. Charles feinted. Chandler reacted, and Charles landed a perfect left hook. Chandler stumbled backwards. His legs wobbled. He was hurt. Charles didn't hesitate. He swarmed forward, landing punch after punch. Chandler went down. Charles jumped on him, landing ground and pound. The referee was watching closely. More punches. Chandler tried to cover up, but the shots kept coming. The referee waved it off. 2 minutes and 28 seconds into the second round, Charles Oliveira had just knocked out Michael Chandler to become the UFC lightweight champion. He jumped to his feet, ran to the corner, and collapsed in tears. All the pain, all the losses, all the times people told him he'd never make it all poured out in that moment. In Vicente de Carvalho, the streets erupted. People jumped on cars. They screamed. They cried. The community had raised money to send Charles to America for his first UFC fight 11 years ago. Now he was the champion of the world. At the post-fight press conference, Charles was asked about the journey, about overcoming 8 losses to win the belt, about proving everyone wrong. Nothing and nobody will beat me more than life already has, he said. That sentence defined everything. The boy who couldn't walk, the family that sold cardboard to pay for training, the fighter who got knocked out, submitted, and counted out. Life had already hit him with everything it had. And he was still standing, still fighting. And now, finally, he was the champion. Charles Oliveira wasn't satisfied with just winning the belt. He wanted to prove he was the best lightweight in the world. He wanted to clear out the division. December 2021, UFC 269 inches, Las Vegas. First title defense against Dustin Poirier, one of the most accomplished fighters in UFC history. Poirier had knockout power, championship experience, and respect from everyone in the sport. First round, Poirier hurt Charles badly with a punch. Just like the Chandler fight, Charles was in trouble early. His back was against the cage. Poirier was landing heavy shots. But Charles stayed calm. He clinched. He survived. he made it to the second round. Round 2, Charles changed levels perfectly, took Poirier down, moved to the back, and then, with 1-2 left in the round, he locked in a rear naked choke. Poirier tapped. Charles Oliveira had just submitted one of the greatest lightweights of all time. Performance of the night bonus. First successful title defense. The MMA world was stunned. Charles was supposed to be a grappler who was weak under pressure. Instead, he was proving he could overcome adversity and finish elite competition when it mattered most. May 2022, UFC 274 inches, Phoenix. Second title defense against Justin Gaethje, the former interim champion and one of the most violent fighters in the division. But before the fight even happened, disaster struck. Charles missed weight by half a pound. The championship was stripped before he even stepped in the octagon. If he won, he wouldn't be champion. Only Gaethje could win the title. Charles was devastated. He apologized to his team, to his fans, to Brazil. But he had come too far to fold now. First round, Gaethje came out swinging, big hooks, massive leg kicks. He was trying to take Charles's head off. Charles weathered the storm, using his grappling to survive. Round 2 started. Charles landed a clean right hand that stunned Gaethje. He moved forward, another shot. Gaethje tried to recover, but Charles sensed blood. Charles closed the distance, took Gaethje's back standing, dragged him to the ground. And with 30 seconds left in the round, he locked in a rear naked choke. Gaethje tapped. Charles had just finished another all-time great. He wasn't the official champion because of the weight miss, but everyone watching knew Charles Oliveira was the best lightweight in the world. October 2022, UFC 280 inches, Abu Dhabi. Charles Oliveira versus Islam Makhachev for the vacant lightweight championship. Islam was the new boogeyman of the division, trained by Khabib Nurmagomedov. Undefeated in the UFC, dominant wrestling, suffocating grappling, most people picked him to win. For 2 rounds, the fight was competitive. Charles had moments. His submission attempts were dangerous. His striking was sharp. But in the second round, Islam took Charles down and trapped him in an arm triangle choke. Charles tried to escape, but the squeeze was too tight. He went to sleep. Charles Oliveira had lost his first fight in over 3 years. Islam Makhachev was the new champion. Charles was gracious in defeat. He congratulated Islam. He said he would be back. But there were questions. At 33 years old, after suffering his first submission loss since 2016, could Charles climb back to the top? The answer came fast. April 2024, UFC 300 inches, Las Vegas, the biggest card in UFC history. Charles Oliveira versus Arman Tsarukyan in a #1 contender fight. 3 rounds of absolute war. Tsarukyan's wrestling was elite. His pressure was relentless. He had championship aspirations. But Charles showed the heart of a true champion. He survived every submission attempt. He landed devastating strikes. He never stopped fighting. Split decision. 2 judges scored it for Tsarukyan, 1 for Charles. Charles had lost another close, controversial decision. But 7 months later, at UFC 309 inches, November 2024, Charles got a rematch with Michael Chandler. Another war, another fight of the night. This time, Charles won a clear decision. Charles was back in the title picture. The UFC booked him to face Ilia Topuria for the vacant lightweight championship at UFC 317 on the 28th of June 2025. The 28th of June 2025. T-Mobile Arena, Las Vegas. UFC 317. International Fight Week. Charles Oliveira versus Ilia Topuria, the vacant lightweight championship, the biggest fight of 2025. Topuria was the undefeated phenom. He had knocked out Alexander Volkanovski and Max Holloway in back-to-back fights to capture the featherweight title. Now he was moving up to lightweight, chasing double champion status. Topuria predicted he would knock Charles out in the first round. He broke down exactly how he would do it. The confidence was absolute. Charles didn't engage in trash talk. He never did. He let his fighting speak for itself. The fight started. Charles came forward aggressively, looking to test Topuria's power. They traded strikes. Charles attacked with leg kicks. Topuria waited for his opening. Charles shot for a takedown. Topuria defended and scrambled. They clinched against the fence. Charles went for a body lock. Topuria spun free. Then Charles made a mistake. He stayed in the pocket too long. Topuria landed a clean right hook, then a left. The combination was perfect. Charles went down hard. Topuria followed with ground strikes, 2 punches. The referee stepped in. 2 minutes and 27 seconds into the first round, Ilia Topuria had knocked out Charles Oliveira to become the new 2-division UFC champion. Just like that, it was over. Charles lay on the canvas, processing what had happened. In the biggest moment, against an undefeated killer, he had been caught. The dream of regaining the championship was gone. At 35 years old, with 11 losses now on his record, Charles faced a crossroads. Was this the end? Or could he find a way back one more time? After UFC 317, Charles Oliveira returned to Guarujá, to the favela of Vicente de Carvalho, to the community that had always believed in him. The mural was still there, on the side of Tonho's Market. Charles's face painted large, the UFC belt in his hand, the Brazilian flag behind him. Kids played in the street in front of it, dreaming their own dreams. Charles didn't hide from the loss. He didn't make excuses. He thanked Topuria. He acknowledged he'd been beaten by the better man that night. And then he said the same thing he always said: "I'm not done yet." Charles Oliveira's UFC record stands at 35-111 NC. He holds the record for most submission wins in UFC history, 17. Most finishes in UFC history, 21. Most post-fight bonuses, 21. He was the lightweight champion. He defeated legends like Dustin Poirier, Justin Gaethje, Tony Ferguson, Michael Chandler. But the numbers don't tell the full story. The story is about a 7-year-old boy who doctors said might never walk, who became one of the most dangerous fighters on the planet. The story is about a family that sold cardboard and snacks so their son could train, who saw him become a champion. The story is about a community in the favelas that pooled their money to send a teenager to America who watched him conquer the world. The story is about a fighter who lost 8 times in the UFC, who went on an 11-fight winning streak and captured gold. The story is about resilience, about refusing to quit when life hits you with everything it has, about standing back up every single time you get knocked down. Charles Oliveira is Du Bronx from the favela. He wears that nickname with pride because it represents his journey, every struggle, every sacrifice, every moment of doubt that he turned into determination. In 2012, Charles founded Instituto Charles do Bronx, IC Bronx, offering free jiu-jitsu classes, education, nutritional support, and mentorship to children in Vicente de Carvalho. Over 150 kids have come through the program. They train on the same mats Charles once trained on. They learn the same submissions that made him famous. In April 2025, Charles was inducted into the UFC Hall of Fame under the Forrest Griffin Community Award category for his philanthropic work, not for his fighting for his heart, for what he gives back. In 2025, 405 films announced they had secured the life rights for a biopic about Charles's life. The film will be shot in Brazil and Las Vegas, telling the story of a boy from the favelas who became a UFC champion. Charles still lives in Guarujá, in the Acapulco condominium, but he's never far from Vicente de Carvalho. He could move anywhere in the world. He chooses to stay close to his roots. On fight nights, when Charles enters the octagon, the streets of his neighborhood fill with people. His grandmother and aunt set up screens outside the house. Kids jump on cars. Adults who remember Charles as a little boy selling cheese salads watch him fight for championships. Whether he wins or loses, they celebrate him because Charles Oliveira represents something more than fighting. He represents hope. He represents the possibility that where you start doesn't determine where you finish. Charles Oliveira's story isn't finished. At 35, he's older than most championship contenders. He's taken damage in wars against the best fighters in the world. He's lost 3 of his last 5 fights. But he's also Charles Du Bronx Oliveira, the boy who couldn't walk, who became a UFC champion, the fighter with the most submissions in UFC history, the man who finished Poirier, Gaethje, Ferguson, and Chandler. In October 2025, Charles is scheduled to face Mateusz Gamrot at a UFC Fight Night event. A win puts him right back in the title conversation. A loss might close the door on another championship run. But win or lose, Charles's legacy is secure. He proved that talent and heart can overcome any obstacle, that a favela kid with a heart condition can become one of the greatest fighters on the planet. That losing doesn't define you, how you respond to losing defines you. Charles has been knocked out, he's been submitted, he's missed weight, he's lost fights he should have won. He's been counted out more times than anyone can remember. And every single time, he got back up. That's the real story of Charles Oliveira. Not the championships, not the records, not even the incredible submissions. The story is about a fighter who never, ever quit. A man who honored his family's sacrifices by becoming great. A champion who gave back to his community instead of forgetting where he came from. Du Bronx doesn't just mean from the favela. It means from the struggle. It means from the bottom. It means from the place where most people never escape. Charles Oliveira escaped. and then he went back to help others escape too. From that hospital bed at age 7 to the UFC Hall of Fame at age 35, Charles's journey represents everything beautiful about combat sports and the human spirit. He faced death and chose to fight. He faced poverty and chose to dream. He faced defeat and chose to continue. There will be other lightweight champions. There will be other submission artists. There will be other Brazilian fighters who come from the favelas. But there will only ever be one, Charles "Do Bronx" Oliveira, the boy who couldn't walk, who became a legend. Thanks for being with us. If you enjoy stories about the best fighters on the planet, their journey to success, and incredible fights, subscribe to the channel and hit the bell so you don't miss new episodes. Many more legends ahead.